I'm a 28-year-old professional marathon runner working as a running coach and a content creator to make my money. I have an amazing support circle and a really positive outlook on life and who I am, but it really wasn't always this way, and years ago I probably wouldn't have believed you if you'd have told me this is where I would be today. So I'm going to use this video today to give some advice to my lost, less confident younger self, my younger athlete self, and some of it I'm hoping you might find useful as well. But first, I'm going to run it back to give you a brief backstory of that younger me. And as a heads up, I do touch on my history with an eating disorder in this video, so if any of that may be triggering to you, please watch on carefully. Does anyone else remember being under the age of 12 and knowing at exactly what age they were going to have bought their own house, held down a good job, got married, had kids, just have their whole life figured out? That's a list of things that I thought I needed to have figured out at that young age. And I think societal pressures have a lot to say for that, especially for young girls to have get married, have kids in that list, as if that's their only purpose on this planet. I digress. I mentioned in the last video how I couldn't settle on just one thing that I wanted to do or be when I grew up. Partly because I enjoyed so many things, but partly as well because I think I lacked the confidence deep down to commit to just one thing and believe that I'd be good enough at it. This undertone continued through my whole life. As I finished school and started university, I couldn't understand how I was going to set myself up to do so well in life. Everyone else around me seemed to have it all figured out. Spoiler alert, no they didn't. No they don't. And I still today feel the same way sometimes. I still have those doubts, but it's quieter than ever before. I was a badly behaved kid for most of my time at school, which I now think came from a lack of confidence in how smart I was, how good I was at things. I could easily cover all of that up with a great sense of humour and some serious mischief, which got me class clown status, and I loved it at the time. But that bad behaviour ultimately nearly derailed me, which I go into in a lot more detail in this video up here. Luckily, I knuckled down after moving schools to complete my A-levels, which is the last 2 years of high school in the UK. And I ended up going to university as a last-minute decision after doing way better than I thought I would in those A-levels. I deferred my place at university for a year so that I could stay at home, earn some money for a bit, figure things out a little more, and to try and recover from an eating disorder. I've spoken before on this channel about my history with an eating disorder and how alone it made me feel. In particular, in my time running in the NCAA as an Oregon Duck. And later on in this video, I'm going to talk about the advice that I'd give to my younger self when I was really suffering with my mental health. But before that, I'd like to talk about one of the things that started me on the path towards recovery, and that is therapy. This video is a paid partnership with BetterHelp, and I couldn't think of a more fitting time to share with you one of the ways that you can truly put yourself first, which is by working with a therapist. I often wonder, if I'd gotten therapy at the early stages of my eating disorder, would the 9 years of struggle that followed look different? Now, that's a question that I obviously can't know the answer to, but I do know that acknowledging that you have a problem or that some area in your life would benefit from therapy, and then taking action on that, sounds like a great place to start. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. Therapy can be really, really hard, and a lot of people that I know have really struggled to find the right therapist or don't like the idea of face-to-face therapy. With BetterHelp, you can have your therapy sessions as a phone call, as a video chat, or even via messaging if you'd prefer that. It's about whatever the most comfortable version of therapy is for you. I've shared a link in my description, and essentially, to get started, you fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs. Then you'll get matched with a credentialized therapist, in most cases within 48 hours or less. And one of the things that's so great about BetterHelp is that you can fit therapy into your schedule when it works for you. And if you don't really fit with a therapist that you've first been matched with, which is a super common thing in therapy, you can easily switch to a different therapist at no additional cost. If you think you might benefit from therapy, consider BetterHelp. Click the link at the top of the description or head to betterhelp.com/philybowden, and clicking this link helps support this channel but also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. I've always held back from doing a full dedicated video on my experience with an eating disorder because although it's something I'm passionate about in terms of sharing my story and wanting to help others avoid going through what I did, I also know that eating disorders are so complex. And I'm always hesitant to share too much of the detail for fear that it might trigger someone who's struggling in that regard. But if you'd like to see a dedicated video on this and think it would be helpful, let me know in the comments section and I'll have a think about how I can do that right. And my video about my experience as an Oregon Duck does touch on this. And I also talk about how I went out there with such high expectations, both from me and from those around me. And it didn't work out. It did the opposite of that. This big, exciting opportunity that was meant to be the absolute making of me absolutely broke me. I came home from running a year and a half at the most prestigious school for running in the NCAA, and I almost quit the sport. I almost stopped running for good. What a plot twist that I'm now a professional marathon runner, getting paid to make videos about running and to coach other people on how to be a better runner. I hated this sport and now I've never loved it more. Now, it wasn't a simple or a quick path between those two very opposing points in time. It took a couple of years before I even started making these videos, and we're 2 years on from that now. But if I just zoom out for a sec, it's pretty astonishing how time can heal and just how wrong we can be about our future. Which brings me to the advice that I would give to my less confident, sometimes scared, and a little bit lost younger self. There will be a time, and it may be a long time, where you may feel lost and directionless. Like you've been left behind and like everyone else has their shit figured out. You do not need to have a plan for your life figured out. Ever. Yeah, it's a good idea to have an idea of your next steps for the next few weeks or months, but it's also totally fine if you don't. And stressing about not knowing that will absolutely never help. Know that this phase of your life is not permanent. And accept that it's not a race. You don't need to have it all figured out. That's okay. And there's a whole long list of very successful, very influential people who did not have their shit figured out in their teens, in their 20s, in their 30s and beyond. You might feel completely out of control of your life at certain times. Not being in control of the direction it's headed in, or it being in the hands of other people. Waiting for someone to decide if you got the job. Waiting for your exam results so that you can see if the university has decided to let you in. It's uncomfortable, but you can't control everything. And you just have to accept that. Ah, yes, my good friend control. I wouldn't say I'm a control freak. However, I do like to be in control. And funnily enough, that's often where eating disorders arise from. Feeling out of control in certain areas of your life and fixating on the one thing that you absolutely do have complete control over: what you eat. Unfortunately, this really doesn't help things, and in the end, you feel, or I felt anyway, like the food was actually controlling me. Kind of counterintuitive, and it also made me miserable, a horrible person to be around, tired, cold, and very unwell. So specifically in relation to my eating disorder that controlled me for the best part of 9 years, my advice to myself first and foremost is to talk. Talk to those around you, the people that love you, your friends, your family, your support system, and seek help. Because the longer you don't, the deeper it roots and the harder recovery becomes. The impact it has on your long-term health worsens, and the longer that road to recovery takes. I would tell myself to remember how much I love running, and that I want to be doing this for as long as I possibly can, and that an eating disorder is not compatible with that long term. And I tell myself it's not embarrassing. That was the biggest thing that held me back from opening up to those around me. Sheer embarrassment. And the truth is, it's actually only embarrassing in your perception of those interactions and how those conversations will pan out. It's bloody hard to start with, but the more you talk about it, the less embarrassing it gets and the easier it gets to talk about it, especially if those around you are supporting you and they're really fantastic listeners. So have a good support system around you, good people that you can go to talk about anything. To the younger kid in me, and athlete, eating disorder aside, be patient, young one.
Much to learn.
Yes, running is a race, but you have so much to learn, and you're gonna make mistakes along the way. Listen, 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 listen. Hopefully you can put listen there. Listen to good advice from good people around you who have been in the shoes that you are in right now. Like me, listen to me. Be consistent. Go to training. Take your time increasing your volume. Listen to your body and never run through an injury. Learn from the bad races, and the good ones too. Both experiences are equally important. Be yourself and love yourself. That sounds super cringe, but you are you, and the world is a much more interesting place because we are all so different. Not everyone's gonna like you, and that's okay. Don't change for them. And above all, prioritize the fun. If you get too serious, too young, you take the fun out of it. And when you're older, like me, the fun is the part that you rely on to fall back on when it gets really serious. I'm not sure I'd change anything if I could go back and run through all of it again. Partly because the butterfly effect absolutely terrifies me, and I really love the life that I have now, and I wouldn't want that to change. It's not the life I would have predicted. I'm not married and I don't have children, and I am very content with that. And I also try not to have any regrets. But equally, I think it's important to reflect and have a new perspective on the things that you went through now that you're at a distance from them. And sometimes that can help someone out that's in the shoes that you were in a few years ago. It's way too easy to say that the past is in the past and I've been there and I've done it. But when you're young and experiencing new things, it's scary sometimes. So a little bit of advice and sharing how things weren't plain sailing can help someone, I hope. And my last piece of advice is love the grind.
You are looking at Philip with a camera.